Welcome to a new episode of Sustainability Forward, our podcast where we discuss the key issues surrounding the topics of sustainability and climate change. My name is Wrishi. I'm your host for the podcast. As you know, in the past, we have discussed important topics such as climate economics. We've discussed the financing of energy transition and sustainability projects, and we've discussed many other macro issues on the topic. On today's episode, we have a very important topic, and that is around the people aspect of climate change. To discuss that with us, we have a special guest. Her name is Cecile Pompei. And as always, with me is Carmine Fiume, my co-host, who will introduce our guest. Carmine?
Thank you, Wrishi. I'm very excited today for this episode to have a friend joining us, a friend who's also very well into the dynamic of people. Cecile is a Chief People Officer that has lived and worked in 9 countries and 4 continents. So in Europe, in Latin, in Asia, in Africa, with extensive experience in environmental impact and social entrepreneurship. Previously, she was the Chief People Officer at Sistema.bio, an agroecology renewable mid-sized organization. And Cecile worked also with solar energy in India and East Africa, foundations such as Milcom and Mozilla in London, and microfranchising in South Africa, where she was the co-founder of the MFA, Microfranchise Accelerator, that won a Oscar Power of the Small Award in 2012. Currently, Cecile is doing fractional people HR work with various companies in the climate change space. So, Cecile, thank you for joining and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Cecile, again, thank you for joining the episode with us today. Let me first start from the perspective of potential candidates or people who are interested in joining this broad industry of climate change, climate technology, sustainability, however we may call it. And what I want to specifically understand from your side is, as a HR or people leader in this space, what are the key factors that motivate professionals to pursue these fields? And if you could also talk about how these aspects have changed or evolved in the recent past, that'll be great.
Yeah, of course. And actually, I think it has changed quite a bit. And so maybe let's start there, to get us kind of to introduce the topic. I think it has evolved quite a bit to work in climate change. And before, I really think it was not as trendy and maybe something that was regarded as more for maybe super climate activists. And I do think it has democratized quite a bit. And frankly, as well, looking a bit more at the reasons for this, I think there's quite a few reasons and not necessarily what we expect. The first thing is probably that there are more jobs available and visible, for people. So before it was a bit more hidden, and right now there's a lot of jobs that you can see. I think people before, my perception is that people thought it was more NGO or again, more very activist like the Greenpeace and the like. And now we can see some companies and even mid-sized companies that really work full on in climate change, right? So it doesn't have to be a side thing anymore. It doesn't have to be either only a sustainability part of the company anymore. There's really companies that work like fully in climate change. So I think it has democratized quite a bit. So there are more jobs available to everyone. That's the first thing I was trying to say. The second thing is probably there is a sexiness factor to it right now. I do see right now that, almost like tech was a few years ago, really climate change is getting a lot of good press right now. It's something we hear everywhere, we see it everywhere. And I see it as a chief people officer because a lot of people come and apply to you and they don't really know why. And I think when I was starting my career, it was really consulting and banking. And right now I see that everyone coming out of university wants to do climate change. So I think it's quite, it's really a hot topic and sector right now. And then as well, and this is interesting, I think there is something that I didn't expect. You kind of expect, and people tell me all the time, oh, it's probably because people want purpose. Actually, one of the first factors that we see is that right now in general in the workforce, people are kind of tired of working so hard. And a big motive for change is work-life balance. Salary as well, but we'll get back to this. But really work-life balance, more flexibility, kind of more interest into what you do. And I think people are like, well, if I'm going to work that hard, there needs to be something, as well, where I can invest a bit more personal time, etc. So I do think where we expect it to be to find purpose, the biggest motive is much more like work-life balance, trying to get involved into something that is potentially more flexible. And there's this rep about climate change and social impact to maybe have this option. And of course, the last one, people want to have a purpose. I think right now we're into, I won't say it again, like we're in a world of polycrisis. So of course, I definitely see. And I think before I used to see it a lot on middle-aged people when they have kids, they're like, oh my God, should I change something? And now I really see it coming out of university. Like before they were doing consulting first, maybe, or banking first and then coming, but really there's a lot of people that start right from the start. So for sure, there's like a big, I want to have purpose driver. So I think, that's kind of the different things I've seen that have, one, change, and second, motivate people. But overall, just to wrap us up, like there are more jobs available, or more visible as well. So I think it's a whole.
Right. And in going forward in the future, do you expect these kind of jobs or this sector to sort of become a mainstream attraction for prospective candidates to come in?
I wish. I think one of the company that really excited me this year, they have big posters in their office, and it's written the best. I mean, I will paraphrase more or less, no, but the best brains of nowadays are not working on making marketing ads, but much more on solving the most important problems in the world. So I really hope so. I think it depends. A few things need to happen, no? Like salaries need to follow up. Companies need to become bigger. Right now, it's a lot of startups, and therefore you cannot have people only working in startups. So the sector needs to mature a bit. So I hope so. I mean, sustainability did become like kind of mainstream. Climate change and really companies focusing solely on climate change, I haven't seen yet, but I'm hoping for it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And I guess also, Cecile, there are other two elements. So one is the clock is running. So there is a sense of eco-anxiety also that is becoming more and more common, and probably young generations start to feel it because they see how things are accelerating and the window of opportunity to make an impact is closing. And also think about what you're saying, probably what we experienced during the recent year with COVID and the process of what has been called the quiet quitting has probably also accelerated some of the dynamics you were saying, I guess.
So this is really interesting because I think at this, like on the one hand, I want to say yes to this. On the other hand, well, so I think there is a generation thing. So the young people, they're a bit more like, hey, we need to do something. There is a lot of anxiety, and one of the biggest way of solving your eco-anxiety is, of course, to work on it, right? But on the second thing, I think there is a negative somehow side to it because people come in the climate change sector hoping they can do everything and nothing, and it will solve the world. And actually, it's going to be more complicated than this. So first of all, we're going to have to work on different problems that might be the problems we need for the 10, 15 years, but not necessarily long term. The second is quiet quitting might not be only a purpose of the company thing. It might be as well, how do you organize your work? So right now there's a lot of talk around remote work, etc. as well. So yes, like this is really something we need to see, like the world is happening right now and we need to see what's happening. But what I thought was super interesting is I was listening to a conversation on generations, and really everyone assumes that the Gen X and Gen Alpha, they only want the best jobs in the world. But actually, if you look at the trends, they want the best jobs in the world, but as well with the best salaries. And there's only tech that can do it right now. So I don't know, how do they make the final cut? Like, do they actually take the job even though it pays maybe twice as little? or not, but I don't think we can affirm very strongly just yet, you know, that climate change can solve everything just now, even though, again, I wish.
You're right. And you mentioned something important. A business case has to also be relevant and support this effort. Now, let's switch to the skills. I think this is quite important. So if we think about what are the skills and attributes that are most in demand in the climate sector right now, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I get asked all the time, actually. And my first answer is really not what people expect. I think, first of all, what people need to do is define what do they want to do in climate change. And by this, I mean, people come to me and they tell me, hey, I really want to work in climate change. What do I need to do? Or what skills do I need to develop? And I kind of turn around and say, you know, climate change is a big sector. So first of all, there's a lot of roles in climate change. So you can do finance, sales, you can do HR like me, you can do, you know, anything is possible. And the second thing is there's a lot of subsectors. Do you want to do agroecology, renewables, carbon? You know, there's so many things in climate change as well. So I think for me, first step is maybe define what you want to do. And that's always, always, always the first thing I answer. Because if you come to an HR and say, I want to work in climate change, really, I cannot help you. There's too much. So that's my first answer. Second, I think like in every sector right now, we need more, you know, data analysis, project management, you know, as a general thing. And maybe in some technical job, and this is where climate change might be a bit different, and to kind of be a bit more politically correct when people ask, is like there are a lot of new subsectors and new technologies and new solutions that we don't know. So I think here what does become interesting is just to say, well, if something is really interesting to you, so let's say you look at the climate change sector, you say, okay, really, I love regenerative agriculture, then, you know, there are some technical skills to learn there. So I don't want to say that nothing needs technical skills. I think some things do, and especially if you have a technical role. So anything in, you know, agronomist, engineering, you know, there's a lot of technical roles. So here, find out the subsector, and yes, it would make sense to learn some technical skills if you already know what you want to do, okay? But then, again, to go back on my non-political comment, I think it's like every sector you enter, you can learn when you start. So I've never heard someone telling me before they arrive in banking at the end of our studies or whatever, oh my God, I'm entering banking. What skills can I learn? I've never heard someone saying this. I've never heard someone saying this to sell in FMCG. So, I mean, as well, I think there's a lot of anxiety around which skills can I develop to be, you know, legitimate to enter this sector. And really, I want to say, well, you can learn as well as you go. So let's say, except if it's a super technical role, but then even this, you know, you could technically and take courses on the side, etc. So yeah, so I think it's maybe not the first place to start. Maybe start by defining what you want to do, which is in role, which is in subsector. If you want to do something technical, it does make sense even more to define it, because yes, you want to work on some gaps. And then here I do see some gaps with new sectors. So regenerative agriculture, I see, carbon, I see, renewables, there's lots of new renewables, there's new construction materials, climate adaptation. So all these technical things they do, if it's what you want to do, it makes sense. Yeah, but again, first step, start with you, start to define what you want to do, start to see which skills you've learned before, what could you transfer. And then I think only the second step is, okay, can I develop this? And arguably you could develop while you start or 6 months before, right? It doesn't have to be, I see a lot of people putting pressure on themselves and say, no, I'm not legitimate. I don't want to start. Maybe in 3 years when I'll be ready, you know, jump. And there's a moment where you can take a course 6 months while you still do your job, but then you have to jump. Yeah, that's my, not always very political, but that's my answer.
No, but it's really a good point, Cecile. It's very, always very encouraging to hear from an HR leader to say don't be hostage too much of your past and your, I don't know, your resume, but focus more on your attitude and what you want to learn out of it. I think is the right approach also here. But if we look on the demand side from companies, it could be corporate, it could be startups. What do you see are the most request skills from the demand perspective?
I mean, again, it's my big opinion on this. My big opinion is that what we really need as a sector right now is more, but this is really me, it's more senior people. So it's more managing skills. That's on the one hand. So I do think there's a lot of climate change is mostly startups right now. And this is what, because we're trying new things, we haven't cracked the nut on everything. So there's lots of startups. So for me, the top skill is maybe management skills and a bit more like this kind of senior energy into teams. The second thing on the demand, I think it really depends. So for sure, carbon is a big one, but it's because the subsector of carbon is booming. So carbon is one. There's a lot of like new things arriving in the market. In regenerative agriculture, where I was, I see a lot of gaps as well. So for example, I hear all the time about agronomists and people that understand how it works, people that can build methodologies and new manuals. So I do see some technical things, but it's so specific. It's more because it hasn't been really developed just yet, right? So we're coming up with climate change solutions as we go. And therefore it's so new that there's always, all these innovations, we haven't cracked them yet. So on the demand side, I think professionalism on the one hand, and maybe more senior leader, and this is where people that come from like maybe more structured company really would have a lot of value added. They bring methodologies, they bring toolbox, they bring seniority. And on the second hand, depending on your subsector, there's so much that hasn't been researched yet, like, I don't know, only this year I've seen so many new companies working on things that have never been done before. So of course, like one of the company I do fractional work right now, they do carbon capture, direct air carbon capture. And of course, this has never been done before. So you need to recruit people that can adapt to this. It's not really that know how to do it, everything, because of course it's still new. We don't all know, but I can learn fast, adapt to this, and then be technical enough that they still bring something, right? So it's difficult to be that vague. I think it's as well based on subsectors, I would say. Yeah, and probably maybe more on the corporate side, maybe more sustainability. I do think there's a lot of like ESG reporting needs, which I think there's quite a bit of need of reporting and data analysis on in the sector in general as well.
I agree. And at the end of the day, despite its ability to solve some of the biggest problems, it is an industry, although in many ways in its early days. And like any other industry, one of the challenges ahead is to think of scaling up where there's been impact, right? So the question really is, Cecile, from the perspective of companies, right? What do you think are the challenges they face when they think about scaling their teams to meet this demand for climate action? And if you could give us some examples of how they're typically addressed, that will be great.
Yeah, I don't know if the biggest challenge is scaling the teams right now. That's my interesting answer. And what I mean with this is, again, the sector is quite small, and I do think the challenge currently is maybe not scaling the team, is maybe attracting and retaining top talent, which probably is a very common thing to all startup world and therefore tech, right? So, but let's assume it's generating enough talent in general. I think the biggest challenge I hear, so remember it's a perception, is really salaries. And I've had like crazy conversations about this with candidates that arrive and they tell me they're so motivated and they want this, but then you tell them, hey, it might be 10, 20, 30% less, and then it's a big no. So I think the salaries on the company side, the salaries is a hard thing, especially when you have tech in front. Because if your competition is tech, I mean, tech always pays so well. So people kind of expect this, and it creates a bit of the difference is so big, it's hard to compete, basically. So I think that would be in terms of attracting talent or scaling team, that's really a thing. The second, and I repeat kind of what I had said before, for me here, the big challenge and what I would love to see more of is professionalism. And this is maybe the way we say it in French, but like we do need a lot of older, more mature, more comfortable talent coming with a lot of experience, a lot of like toolbox, a lot of maturity, a lot of humility. And that's really difficult on the company side, because how do you attract them, right? They would work for something much smaller. We don't really know if the technology work. Some of them, so it's a lot of bets. So I do see people interested, but sometimes they don't really know how to assess what will work or not. So there's a bit of like, am I sure? Shall I join? Shall I not join? They don't know. So, but for me, really, one of the challenges to make sure that we get people senior enough that they can scale up properly a team if it was coming to this, right? There's two ways, right? Either you get a junior and he scales up the team and he learns by going and he grows by going, or you get someone a bit more senior in, and then they can build something maybe a bit more like, yeah, they have more experience in building something a bit bigger. So I think that would be a challenge. And then maybe the last one is for sure L&D, so leadership and development, so training. I think one of the challenges as well is that I think, well, as I said, you cannot get a lot of very much more mature and senior talent. So you need to get a lot of younger people, maybe less trained, and you need to train them a lot. Sometimes you need to train them a lot because, one, they don't have the skills yet to become a manager of a big team. It could be training them a lot so they learn, everything. Yeah, leadership training is a big one. But it could be as well, I remember at Sistema.bio, we started one of the carbon team. Well, you need to train them on something that is new, right? So this person needed, that we started the team with, she needed to train herself on carbon. And it's something that you don't have many training worldwide. Well, at the time, not yet, and it's starting, and what is the good one, etc. So being able to train your team constantly is a challenge. I mean, training, especially if it's done externally, is expensive. So we come back to the salary financial conversation. So yeah, I think these are the top 3 challenges I really see in maybe attracting people and scaling teams. So salaries, getting more professional talent, and really being able to train to the level and with the budget that you need. That are the 3 things that probably are difficult.
It's a great answer. Cecile covers a lot of points. Thank you.
And Cecile, so probably last question now. From your point of view as Chief People Officer, from your experience, what advice will you offer to other leaders in this organization that are aiming to build or enhance their team to more effectively combat the climate change?
Yeah, so that really depends if you're more on the sustainability side or on the climate change. So what I say sustainability, I mean, we all know is like a company would have a sustainability department, how to do things in a more sustainable way. Climate change is really at the core of the company, right? So here, I mean, I think it is a bit of a different answer. I think in climate change, for other leaders, I think I would say you want to build very diverse teams. It's a new field. You need a lot of like very different brains to it that come at it in very different way, and you want to make them feel included. I think that's very important, and that's of course how you trigger, like how you generate innovation. But that's really, really important if you want to do things that have never been done before. So everything that startup dreams of, like build super diverse teams, make sure you train them on leadership and that they don't, break down, make sure they're super driven, you give them a lot of purpose. That's really for climate change, I think, super important. I think on sustainability, maybe I would encourage them. I think people are keen. People in big organizations, they're really looking for this. So you could as well even say, there is an interest, you just have to be able to cater to it. So here I would say maybe like provide a lot of training and activities. Like I've met companies that provide, so there's Terra.do, like do, that provides a lot of training on very different topics. So that could be a way to start. And then another way here, like run workshops on how can we have working groups in the company? How can we improve things and make things more sustainable for the company? So you can really ask them what they think. It could be as well provide them, who was telling me this the other day, that 10% of the time, it was actually at Airbnb, they had to invest 10 or 15% of the time, I forgot, to really do something either for an NGO, climate change organization. So I thought that was interesting. So that could be a way in a big company that you motivate and make sure your team works on this and comes back with like new ideas and innovative solutions. It could be as well like I met an organization. What they do is they run kind of like sessions, like learning lunches, where people listen to climate change activists. So that's another good way as well. So really, I think the will is there. People are very keen. So it's just making sure you tap into this really. And that again, that is a bit different because climate change is so core. Big companies, it would be much more like making sure you have, you just set up the perfect space for them to perform and thrive into this. And I would say if you do this well, people will stay. People will stay. They really need this right now. So it's just a matter of like giving them a few options to thrive into the space in sustainability.
Great. On that note, let's come to the close of this episode. Cecile, thank you very much for
My pleasure.
for those enlightening words. I think we looked at climate change from the perspective of potential interested candidates. We looked at it from the perspective of the industry and how it should consider scaling up. And really, we looked at some of the challenges that lie ahead of us. So for me personally, it's been a great episode, Cecile. Thank you. For our audience, as you know, we are Sustainability Forward. We are under the same banner on LinkedIn. Consider joining us on the LinkedIn page. And we are also on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and YouTube as well. Thank you, Cecile, again, and thank you very much to our audience.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Cecile.
Have a lovely day. Thank you.